Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Carl's Conversations. We are having a conversation this afternoon on the 3rd of July as we coast into a holiday. We brought these powerful young men together to have a conversation on police reform. And of course, we all know with the great movement that is going on that was spearheaded by the live killing we saw of Mr. George Floyd up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It has spurned a movement like we haven't seen probably past 50 to 60 years in our country. And we wanted to bring this men together today, get their opinion of what police reform would look like to them. As you know, part of the movement, one of the main things that the movement is demanding that we reimagine policing in this country. Police in this country have killed many Black Americans, especially Black men. And I know that there are opinions about why that is. The bottom line is it is happening. And this is not necessarily a political issue as much as it is a humanitarian issue. There are a lot of opinions out in the social media and out in the actual media about what we're saying. And at some point, all of us are involved in the movement in some way, shape, or fashion. Audience, I wanted to the forefront for you, uh, four young Black men, and these three are millennials. I wanted to hear from them what they think. And I'll tell you, this was not set up. I have had a conversation with either of these young men about what they think. So I have not tried to shape the conversation. So I may be just as surprised as what we hear, but I want them to tell you what they think. Just before we get started, I want to remind the audience that I comment in by way of Carl Armstrong's Facebook page or on my YouTube channel called Carl's Conversations. And Carl's Conversations is spelled just like you see it on my name tag. So go to YouTube, you'll find my channel there. While you're there, if you like what you see, please like and subscribe so you can see what's going on futuristically. As you know, I normally broadcast on another platform, but for this particular conversation and some future conversations, I will broadcast to the Carl's Conversation platform. So we have a tremendous panel here today. We have Christopher Tucker. We have Kashif, aka the Chocolate Thunder 24. I love it. And Timothy Wright Jr. And starting with Mr. Tucker, we're going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell you, the audience, something about them. Go ahead, Mr. Tucker.
Hey family, how we doing today? My name is Christopher Tucker. I am a native of Birmingham, Alabama, living here in Stafford, Virginia. I'm an 8-year Marine Corps vet, and I have a wife and son who I love very dearly, and I'm looking to protect them with my life. And I want to bring my thoughts and happy for Carl to invite me to this conversation on what my thoughts are regarding police reform, and look forward to hearing from my brothers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tucker. And now we have next Mr. Chocolate Thunder.
How you doing? My name is Kashif Winston. Most people call me Rashad. I'm from Norfolk, Virginia, born and raised basically here. Grew up here my whole life. I currently reside at Virginia Beach. I've just recently got into the real estate business, trying to see how that works out for me. And I must say that I'm glad to be here to have this discussion, especially with Black brothers like myself, because I'm sure we all have different perspectives and different run-ins and issues with the police that we can express here today. And I hope this conversation takes off and brings change.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kashif. And last but not least, bringing up the rear, Mr. Wright.
Hey, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Timothy Wright Jr. I am a teacher, high school teacher. I actually teach at my alma mater, Lansdowne High School. Also a licensed funeral director and a minister here at my father's church, Victorious Living Ministries. I've been very touched by the things that have been happening in recent memory, and I'm very honored to be here once again to present some ideas that I have about police reform.
All right. And for those of you who don't already know, I am Carl Armstrong. I serve here in Northern Virginia as assistant pastor of Spirit of Truth Deliverance Church. I also serve as director of operations for Heart for the Community Initiative. This particular forum that we're holding today is on my platform, Carl's Conversations. I believe that this is probably the first panel that I've done exclusively for that platform. So, with no further ado, issue before is form. And according to the NAACP, and I'm quoting them here because they are probably the most recognized name in the charge for police reform, and they've had some things they've asked Congress to do. So I'm going to go down this list of points, and this is not the entirety of the police reform bill, and this is HR 7120. If anybody wants to take note of it, HR 7120. But here are some major points of the police reform bill that's probably before Congress now. One point is law enforcement accountability. We'll get into that. We want to end qualified immunity. We want to end racial and religious profiling. We want to establish uniform policies for the use of force. There will be a mandate, if passed, for data collection on police encounters. We want to ban chokeholds. We want to ban no-knock warrants. We want to limit police military equipment on American streets. We're going to require body cams, and not just that you have body cams, but that they stay on. How about that? And also going to make lynching a hate crime. So I'm sure you gentlemen and some points are familiar with those major points of what I have said. Is there anything else that you would like to see, or anything generally you'd like to speak to those points as we begin? All right,
Well,
I
I
got
feel
you.
when it
Go
comes
ahead.
to accountability, I think it's very important. I was actually having a conversation about this morning. Well, I said I wasn't going to do a whole lot of talking. I'm already talking. But I feel with accountability, there has to be trust. And if you can go into a database and you can find everything that I've been arrested for or whatever, when you pull me over, I feel the same should go for the officers as well. So one thing that I have an idea for when it comes to, accountability sake, I feel that there should be some kind of business card that an officer gives you if they're pulling you over, that has a QR code that's connected to some type of database that shows their discipline record. It shows any kind of encounters they may have, because that really makes it even. If I want to know who's pulling me over, I shouldn't have to ask your badge number. I shouldn't have to ask those things. That should just be given. So that's one idea that I have when it comes to accountability, just making it accessible as far as police records, their discipline records, and that's what I want to contribute.
Amen. And don't feel like you're gonna talk too much. You here to talk. All right. Okay. Anything else before we get started? And when I start asking these questions, anything else?
I don't want to get too deep off in the weeds because I'm already primed and ready to go.
All right. The first thing I want to tackle is qualified immunity. Probably already know what it is. I'll give just a brief overview. Qualified immunity is a statute that really shields government officials. So for federal, state, and local law enforcement, it's difficult for us to sue them personally when there is a violation of our civil rights. And that's why you see so many lawsuits brought forth. Normally, the lawsuits are brought forth of the jurisdiction. If there's a local police matter, it'll be that city or that county or that town. Of course, it'll be that state. And the federal matter, of course, it'll be the federal government. See the officers themselves being sued. And so the qualify protects them in that. And there are a lot of people who feel like we need to strip that because we don't believe that the police officers are held to a great level of accountability. And that is one of the things that we're marching about. You look at what happened in the Taylor case. I mean, the fellow who they were after was already in police custody. Police, and let me tell you something, a qualified immunity and the use of police force go hand in hand because the latest challenges to qualified immunity have come in cases of excessive police force. So if you do any study on that, you'll see those two walk hand in hand. But get back to Mrs. Taylor. Hey, she was asleep in her apartment. Her fiance, who was there with her, thought that someone was breaking in because they were plainclothes policemen who did not identify themselves, and because they had a no-knock warrant. Think about what it uh, sounds like if someone is kicking your door in. So I don't know about you, but if somebody was kicking the door here at 4:06, I would probably make the news too, and that's as nice as I can say it. So we understand, but still, there's been no arrest in her case. And I have no doubt this qualified immunity is playing a part in holding them accountable. So, what do we think about that? Uh, the fact that we do have qualified immunity, and what do you think that ought to look like?
Me personally, I did a little research into the qualified immunity law, and like you said, it started out to protect politicians from being personally sued from the people if they do something crony or phony that the people don't like. It gives them that protection. However, that protection has been extended to the police, which it wasn't really intended to do. And because police have power of life and death on the street. And I'm not sure if people are aware, but the Supreme Court has rejected the qualified immunity case just this month recently. So what they're saying is they're asking states to determine their own level of qualified immunity, which is technically legal to do because states like Washington have already done this. They already got rid of qualified immunity. So the cops will be held accountable for their law, for their actions. But that's only one state in the whole union. So I feel that every state should have, Supreme Court said they don't want to hear it, but still every state should have their level of accountability. Qualified immunity shouldn't protect a person, an officer on the street because they want to play judge, jury, and execution. That's not fair and that's not right, in my opinion. So and qualified immunity should protect the police. And no, it should protect the police. However, I feel that that power is being abused. And just like any power that gets abused, there should be consequences and repercussions for that.
All right.
I think that when we're talking about qualified immunity, I think that it's important for us to recognize the role that the police unions are playing in qualified immunity. There have been numerous cases where police officers have done wrong, have either been terminated or just assigned to desk duty or paid leave, while all the while the police union in the background is lobbying for that police officer to keep their job. So I think that when we talk about qualified immunity, I think that not only do we need to talk about the ability to sue these police officers or having these police officers being held accountable, but we also need to talk about why these police unions are behind the scenes, strong arming cities and governments to keep these bad police officers on the force.
Amen to that. Do
I
you have an
think
opinion on that?
just considering it, I think in every job or every place people serve, somebody has to be accountable for what it is that they do. As a teacher, if I am doing something when it comes to money, if I'm doing something when it comes to a kid, I have to be held accountable. So while I understand the protective measures because they're police officers, and don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for their service, those that are straight up, but there still needs to be accountability nonetheless. And I don't think that accountability should be shifted to a settlement by a city, because even if we're excited that a city awards a settlement of $3 million to a family, where did that money come from? It's still coming from taxpayers' dollars. So is that really a win when all you have to do is allow that person to be held accountable for their actions? So I think it really just comes down to accountability. And I agree how, the police unions, they're well-intended, but at the end of the day, if you're in the way of accountability, you're not really helping the brand of policing in the country when people are literally getting off. So I say protect, but not at the expense of accountability.
All right.
Totally
And
agree.
there's something I want to say here, and this comes from me. I'm not speaking for the panel. I have often said on my Facebook posts, I've said it in the videos that I've done, and I'll say it again. I am not anti-police, and the current administration is not anti-police. And I think that there are a lot of American citizens and a lot of police officers who feel that there's a personal attack and that part of America. And that's just not true. I know there are voices in the movement who want the total abolishment of police. I am not one of those voices. And that's one of the things that I disagree with. But what we are saying is the way that policing is in this country is not beneficial to us. We're dying. And I keep hearing the defense that most of the police officers are good, few bad apples. I believe that to be mostly true. I do believe there are more than a few bad apples because the problem is not just racism. There's an authority problem. Some of these guys are drunk on power, guys and girls, excuse me, men. Women. Some of them are power drunk. Some of them cannot handle the authority that has been vested. Education problem. You know, police officers. Every time you have contact with the police, that is a constitutional issue. It's a constitutional issue. How can you have people sworn to serve and protect and have a mastery and understanding of the Constitution problem? So this is not about being anti-cop. This is everything about being pro peace and pro public and pro fairness. And so I think that we have to reimagine policing in this country. And for me, that's what police reform is really about, reimagining. And so what these gentlemen have said about getting rid of qualified immunity, and I believe so too, because you must be held accountable when something happens like what happened to Breonna Taylor, when something happens to like what happened to Mr. George Floyd. How can those persons be protected? There's something wrong here, and we can't accept this. And that's just bottom line. Before we go forward, any comments on that?
I totally agree because, like you say, the thing that happened to George Floyd, it was four officers there. The law states that if I kill someone and someone's with me, that the person with me is just as guilty for the murder that I did. So I don't understand how the police are exempt to that law because the four officers are all being charged with different degrees of destruction. One is being charged with murder, one is just charged with reckless homicide, and so on and so on. But that's not the law. I don't face those same laws in court myself. So how does a citizen, no matter what job you have, you're still a citizen of the United States, and you must follow the laws that are given of the land. So I don't understand how they can be protected and I'm not under the same law. So you're right. We do need to reimagine it or just totally get rid of it.
Can I speak on something he just said?
Yes.
I think a part of the accountability piece, we have to look at it for what it is right now. You're wondering like how they don't apply the laws because they're all on the same team. When you think about the medical examiner, when you think about the district attorney, and you think about the police officers, they're all on the same team. So if I go after one, I would have to go after all because the one question that I'm asking, how is it that initially there could be no arrest? Why was it initially that the medical examiner could not determine that the cause of death was from asphyxiation? Mm-hmm. All of that works together. So if you're going to go after the police officers, why isn't anybody going after the medical examiner? Why isn't anybody going after the district attorney? So that's a systemic problem. So I just feel you won't see laws being applied because if I go after one, I would have to go after myself too. And that to me is really the bigger portion of police reform is not just the police. It's every entity that is working together in these municipalities that cover for each other. And that's why justice doesn't get served.
I love it.
I think that's a great point. And I knew that when we started to talk about this, that it wouldn't just stop with police reform because it's interconnected. It's interconnected with a whole lot of things. I'm gonna let the conversation happen organically, but I love what you just said there. And if we're gonna take a look at that, you're right. you got a prosecutor's office who daily work with the police, right? And I'm not saying that they won't do their job, but can't you see there's already a bias in there? And sometimes that bias don't have anything to do with race. It's just familiarity. But how can the private citizen, especially the poor private citizen, how can you get justice when you've been violated, when it seems like the team is against you? That's why there is a move in some places to equally fund the public defender's office, right? You see these prosecutors get these huge fundings, and very, very little money goes to public defenders, right?
Mhm.
I just heard of a recent case where the public defender got upset with the defendant because the defendant did not want to plead out, he wanted to go to trial. But the public defender was saying, "Man, I ain't never been to trial. You know, you need to take the plea." And the defendant is saying, "Take the plea, but I didn't do it. I'm innocent. I want to go to court." But such little funding, such a little experience. How was it fair? How was it fair? Chris, is there something that you wanted to say?
No, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Timothy Wright was saying about, this all being interconnected. I mean, everything has a number attached to it. Police are arresting to make a quota. DAs are prosecuting to get a certain amount of convictions because of whatever future aspirations they may have. So everything is tied to a number. And I think that when we not only get people to check their bias at the door, but check their intentions behind why they're doing it, why they're making these arrests, why they're pursuing certain charges on certain groups and demographics of people, then I think we'll really begin to uncover more of why the system is set up the way it is set up. Because if that's what it takes for me as a prosecutor, if a certain amount of murder convictions is what will get me one day to be a judge, then we need to relook at that system. And I mean, of course, the criminal justice system needs to be completely redone. That's another conversation.
Just
Absolutely.
to add on, to
Go
what
ahead.
you guys were saying, there's a phrase for that, and it's called the prison industrial complex.
For sure.
And until we get rid of that whole concept itself, things really can't be changed, because if it's coming down from the top, like private prisons states pay private prisons to be there, and the state job is to fill those private prisons, like, because the states have to pay whether people are there or not. So the laws are going to be made to make sure people go to prison, because money is being made. So when laws are being made to make sure people are go to prison, the police enact those laws. They enforce those laws with viciousness and malicious power. So when they do that, it's a whole cycle of the police enforcing the laws to put people in prison to make money. And until we end the prison industrial complex totally and making money off being in prison, there's more prisoners in America than almost the whole world combined have prisoners. Like we have nearly 2 million people in prison, and of that 2 million, almost 750,000 of them are black men, and we only represent 6% of the population. So that there has to be, obviously, there's an issue of people are what's the word, directly attacking a certain demographic with the prison industrial complex. The Constitution says that you're not a slave unless you go to prison. And it's just fitting to me that half the prison is filled with black men. And the old police used to be the slave catchers. Now now they're catching black men and putting them in prison. It's the same principle. It's just more sophisticated now. So we got to end that whole system.
I agree.
I agree 100%. The only thing I would add, and not really add, just to build on what was said, I feel the only way that we're going to see change or reform, we have to strip away the idea that because it's an entity of the government, it's on our side. That's not to say that they're an enemy, but if you go in with rose-colored glasses or rose-tinted glasses, and you're not really seeing things for what they really are, and you go in under the supposition that they have your best interests, you're going to get duped every time. I believe that was something that Benjamin Franklin said, don't ever be a friend to your government, or Thomas Jefferson, one of the two. But in addition to, because I remember Chris was talking about the police and the DA, but also remember that the medical examiner is the last person that legally gets to tamper with evidence.
Yeah.
That's a very big thing. And we hold whatever they say to be gospel truth. So I just wanted to reiterate that because, working with funeral service, I've seen it. You are the last person that has your hand on evidence. So when it comes to this instance, of police shootings and things of that nature, it needs to be kicked up to a level that removes the local municipality because they're already on the same team.
Agreed. And let me just speak to the quick. I just want to remind you, if you're on, even though we're at the 25-minute mark, it is not too late to start a watch party. We have a lot more to talk about, and this is a very interesting conversation. And I think that as many as we can pull into this, we need to do that. And please feel free to comment, even if your comment is adverse to what we're talking about. We're not trying to brainwash. We're trying to have a dialogue. We only ask that you be respectful. As you can see, the panel has been very respectful. So we ask that any of your comments or questions be respectful, and we'll get to them if we can. Gentlemen, I want to say something to you when we talk about, Rashad, I'm so glad that you gave those numbers on the Black prison population. One thing that I would love our white brothers and sisters to understand is this. When you look at the history of our nation, right after slavery had ended, this country produced what was called black codes, right? And the federal government kind of allowed the states to do this to kind of keep peace with them, because even before the Civil War started, there had always been grumbling, especially in the South, about slavery. So black codes, you made laws that really almost made being black and being poor a crime, because even though slavery was illegal, you could be farmed out to work for different landowners and companies, and they would be paying the state. You could do that if you were considered a criminal. Made unemployment and vagrancy. Y'all, please forgive me. I forgot to turn that off. They made vagrancy and unemployment a crime. So if you got stopped by the police and you could not prove to them that you were employed, that was a crime. You got locked up. And it goes back to the prison industrial complex that Chocolate Thunder was talking about. There we have it, right? So there is a history of this type of thing in our country. So then I hear this argument. Well, if y'all just stop committing crimes, there wouldn't be a problem. You got to understand how this country is made. I'll just take this one thing. Look at the crack cocaine era. Look at the laws that were made to punish those who were possessing, and especially if you were selling crack cocaine. You got people who got sentenced in the 1980s and 1990s who are still in prison now for the distribution of crack cocaine. And you got people who raped and murder who have already done their time and got back out on the streets. Right now with opioids. Well, opioids are not that big of a deal in the black community as it is in the white community. I don't see our legislators jumping to make laws about that. So when we talk about systemic racism and implied bias, this is what we're saying. And I think so many times people don't understand. How do y'all feel about that?
Well, if I may, I want to read the 13th Amendment, Section 1. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And that's exactly what Rashid was talking about. There is no way that you can pay me to believe that we have 47 million Black people in America right now. That is 14.7% of the population. There's no way that you can pay me to believe that 14% of the population is committing over 60 to 70% of all crimes in America. There's no way that that is statistically possible unless there is some type of implied bias or some type of system that is set up to move these Black and brown bodies into this industrial prison complex. So when we talk about that, and I love the fact that my brother brought that up. There is no way, there is no way that, especially for all of the for majority of this population to be black men and men of color, something mathematically does not add up there. And I think that we have to seriously look again at implied bias, because how can slavery be illegal except for punishment of a crime? So you mean to tell me that if I'm convicted of a crime, now I'm automatically a slave again? So yes, slavery does. If you ask me, slavery still does exist, and it exists in the form of sending black and brown people to prison.
Wow, that is a heavy statement, but I can absolutely see why you would believe that. Um, Man, before we move on, anybody else got anything on that one?
I do have a thought, but
Go
I
ahead.
didn't know if Rashad had.
No, you go ahead, and then we'll come back to Rashad.
Okay. Well, you said there has to be a system. I know what the system is. It's called school.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
I purposely got on the discipline committee at my school because I already knew something and I just wanted to see it for myself. And what I found to be the case was the case. When I looked at the discipline numbers just in my school for referrals for disrespect, defiance, and disobedience, I think those are the three D's. Overwhelmingly, and our school is pretty mixed with the population. I think we may have 30% black or 35, 40, not quite half, but it's a good mix. But maybe closer to 20%. The point is 60 to 65%, if not more, percent of all referrals that were processed by administration were to black kids and overwhelmingly black males. So when you think of school discipline, when you also think of how many students are put on special education at a very young age to receive services, so you're now stripping them of any real accountability because of supposed handicaps, where some do, but most do not. Why? Because they get dollars for every special ed student that you have in the school. So now I have dollars coming into me because you're student special ed. I also have big pharma at play because they're getting medication. All of these things rolled up just pushes kids through a system of no accountability and no real protections. So once they walk across that stage and dump into real life with no skills and with no real prospect of real education, they can be a sitting duck for the prison to school to prison pipeline. So that's why I said it's more than just police reform. It's racism. That's really what it is.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. And I'm gonna say something. As much as racism is the problem, and this is gonna roll right into our next portion because I want to deal with the use of force. I've been saying this, and I'm gonna say it again. You have a problem when it comes to police excessive force. Racism is a major driving factor. You also have those who have a problem with having that much authority. You also have people who have an abuse problem. Maybe there's some abuse in their past. Maybe there's an addiction problem. Maybe there's some type of mental health issue, right? And over aggression. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Look at the case that's just coming to light now. It happened last year, but it's just recently coming to light. Elijah McClain, that 23-year-old man in Aurora, Colorado. This was a peaceful young man. I'm gonna tell you, I've been black for 48 years. I have never met a black man who takes his lunch break to go play violin for cats who are in the pound to keep them calm. Maybe y'all have, right? What I'm saying is, look at this guy's character.
Right.
By his own admission, he was an introvert. Maybe he was a little what some of us would call weird or a little different. Well, he had, I think it's anemia, so he gets cold very quickly, right? So him walking back from the store, he had a ski mask on to keep himself warm, right? He has ear pods in. He's listening to music. He's dancing, frolicking. Who called the police on him? And I'm calling him my brother because I'm trying to use a nicer name. There's another name I want to use, but I won't do that. Bless the Lord. The brother who called the police on him even said that it didn't look dangerous. It didn't look like he had a weapon. He just looked sketchy. But if you look at the footage of how the police handled him, I'm saying, wasn't there a different way? It escalated so quickly. He was handled so roughly. And I know some people say, well, he just should have just stopped. He should have just identified himself. Let me tell y'all something. There's a couple things going on here. I keep hearing that we need to teach our children to just respect and obey authority, which I agree that is true. But when you're a black man in this country and you've been through some of the things, my own story, you get tired of the police messing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to know, can I just drive to the doggone store and get what I'm gonna get and go through daily life doing the things I'm doing without the police messing with me? So sometimes there is some defiance. I can't blame it on young kids because I've been a full grown man looking at the police asking them, what do you want? And why are you bothering me? I get it. But should you die for that?
No.
So when it comes to the use of force, this is why we're saying there has to be a reimagining, and that's why it has to be police reform. There has to be a segue and some type of space between what we see and what we ought to see. What do y'all think about that?
I think
Um,
that,
Go
oh,
ahead, bro. Go ahead.
well, I think that there's a difference between respecting authority and being subservient to authority. Number one. Because in 2014, the APA released a study that showed that people view black and brown bodies as older and as less innocent than their white Caucasian counterparts. So I think that when we talk about use of force, I think we have to start there. Well, why in the black community we are taught that we have to behave to a certain standard that other groups of people are not required to police themselves to. We have to ask, why do these police officers, why do those people who are on that disciplinary board at that school view these black and brown bodies as less innocent than their white Caucasian counterparts? So when all of this works together, and immediately two incidents come to my mind. The one recently where the guy in South Georgia was walking from the CVS. Police pulled him over. The guy was sitting there literally taking his information. The other police officer comes out of nowhere and just start roughhousing him and winds up breaking his wrist or rib or something like that. And come to find out, they had the wrong guy. Another incident where, yeah, I think it was in Texas a couple of years ago, where there was a pool party, black kids having a pool party, and the cop comes out, and this was a male. Um, I mean, body slamming young black females for what? So when we talk about use of force, I think we have to start there with those 2 points. Why black people taught that they need to police themselves to a certain standard that other demographic groups are not required to, and two, why society feels that black and brown bodies are less innocent than other people.
Amen.
Um, it goes to the whole concept of just simply the fact that my black skin puts fear in the white man. Like they fear me psychologically, mentally, and physically. If you look at the Eric Gardner case, for example, there was 8 police officers attacking one man. Like eight grown men attacked one man. So that lets you know how they feel mentally and physically. They feel inept. Like they feel they can't take on a black man from the shoulders one on one. So that fear, it escalates to the great equalizer of the gun. Because if I fear you without even speaking to you, I'm just ready. I'm ready to pull my gun out on you. Like I had a police officer one time. I'm riding down Indian River Road. I'm just driving. Now, granted, I know I realize it's police on Indian River Road, so I'm not trying to speed. So I'm doing about 42 and a 45, right? Police look at me, I look at him. As soon as he looked at me, I knew he about to pull me over. So he
Yep.
pulls me over, and I get my license, registration, all that ready. You know what I mean? I'm ready to go. I have it in my hand. I hand it to the officer. All I say is, "Officer, why was I pulled over?" He pulls his gun out and says, "I will shoot you right now." That was his exact words. His first words was, "I will shoot you right now," with his gun out. I'm sitting there like, "Whoa, you got it, bro. Like, I don't want to die today." Like, you got it. Pull me out the car. Next thing I know, I'm on Indian River Road on inside the gutter, my face in the gutter, handcuffs. Now I got police pulling up on me. Everybody searching my car. What's going? Like, I'm fed up trying what's going on. And then what the ticket was, I get a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. Like, so obviously I wasn't breaking the law, but like, so now I'm being held accountable for my actions and all those things. So what if it would have escalated to a point where I would have got shot? So now the excuse of me getting shot is because I didn't have a seatbelt on. Like, none of that makes sense, man. Like, it's been times I've been walking. I won't driving. I've been walking, and the police pulls me over, harasses me. It's like a cop 5'2", but he had a big shotgun with him. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as he get out the car, he cocking his shotgun. I'm standing there like, whoa, what's going on? So I feel like it's just the psychological fear of just me being me. Like, I can't just me living puts fear in their hearts. So they're ready to go to the great equalizer so fast.
And for y'all who don't know, Rashad is about 6'5". Am I correct?
6'4".
Okay, 6'4". And so, to some, I guess he could look intimidating, right? And it's just too much. I think one of y'all may have your volume just a little too loud. I hear a little feedback. Y'all can turn your volume down just a little bit. We can take that feedback out of there. Thank y'all. So I definitely understand it. And let me say this to the audience. This is why we're marching. You see what Rashad just described? If we talk to Timothy, if we talk to Chris, if you heard my stories already, all of us got a story. Now, I will admit, most of my interaction with police has been uneventful, the vast majority of it. But the bad incidents that I've had could be life changing. It only took for Rashad to make one wrong move. He had his license registration out of the car and just asked the question, "What did you stop me for?" And a weapon is drawn and a threat is made, "I'll shoot you right here." Listen, that's excessive force, but that wasn't caught on camera and it's not all over making its way around social media. So I'm sure there's some that's watching who just don't believe it, right? I just don't think the cops would do that. They do it every day. That's why you got some of these young kids out here mad as you know what. That's why we're what's called sick and tired. And some of our white counterparts, you don't see it because you don't live in this skin. So maybe you won't march for police reform because you don't see the problem. But status quo not working for us, right? And we're still dealing with use of force. We saw the terrible use of force with Mr. Floyd's death, right? We saw the terrible use of force with Breonna Taylor. We saw the terrible use of force with Miss Sandra Bland, and definitely Mr. Was it Philandro Castillo? Leandro Castillo? Oh my God! I mean, shot dead in front of his fiance and that 4-year-old baby. There has to be a conversation and positive change when it comes to escalation. And I can't tell you how many people who I have heard of that roll their eyes in the head every time you talk about sensitivity training with the police and de-escalation training. And I don't. The only thing I can say to understand is maybe because it hasn't happened to you. What does the panel think?
I just think, well, first off, Rashad, that's crazy, man. And not to take the conversation backwards, but just like you said, just because it's not on CNN or it's not on the headline of your newspaper, it doesn't make it any less true. And it doesn't mean that it's not happening. And I think in addition to sensitivity training for police, we need sensitivity training as a people, just as a culture, because your experience is not my experience doesn't make your experience any less your experience. So I just wanted to say that. But in addition to like force, I think you would just have to compare apples to apples. Get me right if I'm wrong. The gentleman that you just said that played the violin, he was in Aurora, Colorado, right?
Correct.
Wasn't there someone also in Aurora, Colorado that shot up an entire movie theater and was arrested?
Yes.
So if you have instances where people can institute mass murder and walk away and still have a day of court, but I'm killed for playing with a toy gun, or I'm killed because I have Skittles, or I'm killed because of all these things, or even down in South Carolina, you can go into someone's church, pretend you want prayer, shoot them up, and then they stop you to Burger King on the way home.
Burger King.
Like, so don't tell me that it's not a matter of it being fake or we're just making this up. Look at what's done for others. And if you see what's done for others is not done for all, then you realize you have a problem.
I once again, I'm going to say to those who are listening and watching who may not understand, do you hear what we're saying? Maybe you need to try the best you can to put yourself in our shoes, right? And if you put yourself in our shoes, you'll understand this thing while we're marching. This happens to us all the time, right? And there has to be a difference. Too many of us are dying. And we're not saying that other races don't die at the hands of the police. When you say that, what you do is bolster our argument. There's a problem with police brutality in general. There's absolutely a problem with police brutality against Black people and especially Black men. Therefore, we're marching for police reform. And I want to say this for everybody who may have opposition to the movement, let me tell you something. All this positive change that you've seen over the last 4 to 6 weeks would not have happened without the movement. So you can say what you want to say about different voices in the movement, things that you don't like. If you choose to only deal with the riots, we understand. If you choose to only deal with what you call anarchy, we understand. But look at the big picture. A lot of stuff that's moving now would not have moved. Those Confederate monuments would not have come down. And I do understand that some people feel different ways about all that, but that stuff is offensive to us. And it adds to the tension. So there's got to be a discussion about police reform, especially when it comes to the use of force.
I feel to get rid of to reduce the excessive use of force, we simply should just require police to get more education, as in like a college degree, maybe a college degree in sociology or criminal justice, where they can learn and understand people. Because I think that's where the main disconnect is. Because you know, I mean, everyone knows. Like, if I'm speaking to a white man on the phone, I know I'm speaking to a white man, even if I don't see him. Because white people and Black people speak differently. Our dialects are different. Our cadences are different. So when a white man who's not versed in Black culture comes across a Black neighborhood, he doesn't understand the lingo. He's not able to process that different people have different cultures. So I feel like requiring police to get a college degree in some type of sociology, criminal justice, humanities, or anything like that of the sort should be required. Like any other profession, I got to have a degree. To be a doctor, I got to go to school for 12 plus years. And you're saying the doctor has power of life and death. The police has power of life and death right then and there. And you telling me that they can go, they have that power with a GED? So that doesn't sit right with me. So I feel we just got required police to get a college degree. That'll eliminate 50% of the excessive force right there, because people who go to college tend not to be aggressive, you know?
Let me tell you something. In some states, there is more hours of education and training required for barbers and hairdressers than it
Hmm.
is for police. I'm not putting police down. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we should disrespect those who don't have a college degree. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, but for law enforcement, who every single day on every shift deal with constitutional issues, deal with mental health issues, deal with social issues, deal with humanity. I would agree with Rashad that there probably needs to be a degree. That's something we're going to have to look at. And I hope that we bring that forth in police reform. I really do. Tim, is there anything y'all want to add to that?
I say that I agree 100% with Rashad, but I say on the flip side, a quicker fix would be just have a police force that matches the community that they're policing. It's easier to have people of that community policing that community because they understand the lingo, they understand the people, they understand the culture. Because that's the disconnect when it comes, once again, I speak from the framework of school. Why can't 65% of these referrals to 75% in some instances be issued to Black people? Because out of the entire building, we have 6 Black males as teachers. We don't even have a whole bunch of Black male custodians. I can't think of one. So when you have the people in authority that are not representative of the people that they have authority over, that creates
Yes.
room for these abuses. Even look at our Supreme Courts. Even look at our federal courts. We're not represented. So I think that's a part of the solution as well.
All right. Chris, did you have anything?
No, I was actually going to say the exact same thing that Timothy was saying. There's no way, and I live in Stafford, Virginia, which is uh, Northern Virginia. I should not be able to go to the next city and be a police officer. Because for the exact reasons why we've all outlined. I need to live in the community that I police in because if when I see little Ricky or little Johnny or whomever, I know little Johnny, I know little Ricky, and I know little Johnny and little Ricky's parents. And if I don't know his parents, then I know somebody he's related to. And so I won't be so quick to arrest Lil Johnny and Lil Ricky for a uh, for something that his parents can take care of. Now, if it's something that he's blatantly breaking the law, wielding guns and going, whatever, okay, yeah, obviously do your job. But if it's something that, hey man, go home, you know, I'm not so quick to arrest people when I live in the same community as them because of that rapport that I have, not just with them, but with that family unit as well.
Amen to that. I want to ask y'all something, and this goes right into the use of force and police brutality. It may be just a little off the beaten path, but I think this runs into the conversation. We know that just 4 years ago, NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the playing of the national anthem. Excuse me, and he was showing his displeasure in police brutality. There were a series of killings during that time, if you all remember. And I think there was 9 police who were killed in Dallas, Texas, right? I think that happened in 2015. And that's always been my fear that if we don't do something, that people are gonna get so frustrated to just start picking off police. And I don't want us to get to that point. But if you frustrate people and push them into a corner and they feel like they're not being heard and you're not gonna do anything, I could understand how somebody could flip out and do that. We don't want to see that. But looking at Colin Kaepernick then, and I don't know what your personal thoughts were about him. I can tell you my own. I am a veteran of the U.S. Army. Um, I have been in foreign lands with that uniform on and that American flag on my right shoulder. Um, I thought that he might serve himself better by kneeling at some other time. I didn't agree with him doing it during the national anthem, but I absolutely did not see it as betrayal to the country. I did not see him as a traitor, and I didn't see it as disrespect, but I could absolutely see how others would. I will tell you that it's like a lightning bolt went through my entire psyche and my body when I saw what happened to Mr. Floyd, and I could see very clearly, a little different perspective on Kaepernick, and I will defend him. When you, in my opinion, can look at that flag, and that flag and these brothers and sisters, a flag that doesn't have breath in it, a flag which is a symbol. You care more about that flag than you care about these men and women who are being killed, and some don't die or get beat half to death. I think that's part of our problem here. And I think so many don't understand it. So my question to you, in light of what's going on now, and I want each of you to answer this question, please. And I'll start with Chris, and then we'll go to Rashad and then Timothy. I want you to ask, in light of that, how do you see Colin Kaepernick and his plea for attention to police brutality now, as opposed to then? You first, Chris.
Y'all ready to apologize now? That's all. That's what I say to him. Are y'all ready to apologize now? Because he 4 years ago he brought to the national stage what Black people and brown people have been saying all along, that the police treat us differently than they treat everybody else. And I think that now, 4 years later, it took a quarantine, it took a global pandemic for everybody to get somewhere and sit down and be glued to these little devices long enough to see that we're not lying. We're not making this up. This is not a figment of our imagination. So now that you see it, my question to his detractors are you ready to apologize to him now?
Amen. Rashad, what do you think?
Well, I would say, this look like this. The first slaves came here in year 1619. America itself wasn't founded until 1789. That's almost 200 years right there of Black people coming to America, coming to this land and working for this land and being part of this land and not getting represented properly. When America gets founded, it's still founded on those same principles. Black people have fought in every single war. You learn about Crispus Attucks as a child. He was the first person to die in the Revolutionary War. That was 1783. So Black people have fought in every single war. Just like Carl has stated, he was overseas just recently with the right American flag on his shoulder. We have fought in every war from the beginning until the end. So my question is, when has that flag ever represented me? Like my people, my struggle, my culture, my future. So when Colin was taking a knee, it wasn't a disrespecting of the flag. He was saying that the flag don't represent me. The national anthem don't represent me. Because obviously Black men are dying at an alarming rate, and obviously no one cares about it. So of course I'm gonna take knee to knee because I don't rep this flag. It's like just like on the street. If you are blood, you're not walking around with a blue Crip flag because you don't rep it. It's really that simple. So if something doesn't represent you, obviously you don't pledge allegiance to it. In school, when people were from different countries or whatever, they didn't have to pledge allegiance to the American flag because they had exceptions. So if it don't represent you, then you don't stand for it. And so I feel Colin did the right thing by taking a knee. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you.
I think when it comes to the knee, I think we can't forget the fact that he was advised by a veteran how to execute the process of his protest. So it wasn't like he just inadvertently said, I'm going to take a knee. That was something he conferred with a veteran to find the most respectful way to protest. And I think that's a frustration that I have right now, even with all this protesting that's going on. Even my protest has to be acceptable to you, but you don't have to make knowledge or acknowledge my injustices or the injustices that you inflict. How I say I feel has to be acceptable to you. So when it comes to Colin Kaepernick, I agree with what he did. I agree with how he did it because I see it as a symbol. And to talk on Rashad's point, with him having the feeling that it doesn't represent me doesn't make me any less of American. Just because I can identify how I feel, something doesn't gel with me, doesn't make me any less a patriot. It doesn't make me any less American. But I would just caution when it comes to Black people, especially, we'll say Black and brown. I think we are very passionate, and I feel that we are very emotional. And I think that's part of what makes us beautiful. But I also feel that's what makes us exploited too. Because for all these years, you could say how Colin Kaepernick was a villain, but all of a sudden, you want to acknowledge that the protest was wrong, but there was no formal apology issued to him. And I just found out the first week of the NFL, week 1, you're going to play the Black National Anthem, lift every voice and sing.
Yep.
Like, what is that? I don't care about that. Don't try to stroke my emotions to make me think that something is won. So when it comes to making real progress, I don't want apologies. I want action. Because you can apologize and still turn around and do whatever you want to do. Even when you look at slavery being abolished, now you have slave code. Okay, well, we got rid of the black codes. Now we got rid of black codes, but it morphs into Jim Crow. Well, you can vote, but then you have to pay a poll tax. You have to have a literacy test in Chinese. And the stuff is still going on today. Even in Atlanta, down in Georgia, knowing how many people are there, you're not even going to have enough voting machines. And precincts aren't even fully staffed to process all of these voters. Suppression is still going on. We still have people being disenfranchised. Down in Florida, you can get out of jail, but if you owe any back child support or whatever else, you can't vote. Like, I don't want apologies. Apologies are meaningless. They're words. I want policy and I want reform. I want action.
Totally agree.
Oh, I thought
Totally agree. No, and Tim, I agree with you, man. Like when I got that notification on from ESPN
yeah,
on my phone that they were gonna, I was so upset. I was so upset because the first thing my mind said is, why are you doing this? How many black athletes do you have in the NFL?
75%.
And now, all of a sudden, you didn't even play it in February when the Super Bowl was there. You know, by the way, why anyway, I ain't even going there. But you didn't even play it then. But 75% of the athletes in the NFL are black. And now all of a sudden, you want to play, lift every voice and sing, you can keep it.
Or kneel and kente cloth, all the congressmen. Let's put on kente cloth and let's kneel and put our fist up in the air. Just pass me some laws.
Exactly.
All right, gentlemen, I'm gonna come back to that one because I actually do talk about that. Here's what I want. I want to have a little round table on this one because this one I want to time with because I think this what I'm about to ask you for our opposition, right? The opposition to police reform, the opposition to the current, they are stuck on this, and I want them to hear it from us. When you hear and interpret defund the police, what does that mean to you? And how would you go about whatever it means to you? We're going to start with Chris, then we'll go to Rashad, and then we'll go to Timothy. Take it away, Chris.
I've been waiting on this question. Defund the police quickly. Defunding the police also means demilitarizing the police. Again, I'm an 8-year military veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And why is it that police have the same weaponry that I was issued if I was to go into a combat zone? I'm a civilian. I am a citizen of this country. What is the point? Defunding the police also means that we are right sizing the budget of police forces so that they can respond to violent crime. It also means that we place social workers, marriage and family therapists, mental health therapists. In my view, I would say embed them inside the police departments so that um, when we have um, domestic violence disputes, when we have mental health emergencies or crises, that these um, licensed, trained individuals are riding out with the police to be the lead, not just a co-worker with the police, but they are actually going out responding to these incidents as the lead, and the police is there in more of a security or support role in case something was to go awry. So um, for me, defund the police is not abolishing the police, but just making sure that the police is right sized to what we need them to do.
Thank you. All right, Rashad, hear from you.
Um, well, the phrase defund the police, honestly, I don't like that phrase. I do like the concept. I don't like how it's being presented or the practice of that we have it as right now, because I'm not just too fond of giving emotionally unstable people less money. And maybe, like, people say it's not going to affect their salaries, but it could affect the equipment they can use, the access to resources and benefits that they get from being police. So if we start reducing those things, like, it's going to make police even more bitter, make them even more angry and upset at the people themselves. It's going to make them even more violent because you're taking away their livelihood. Now, I would say that we can get rid of excessive spending. Like, there's different areas where, that I feel like police, you can cut back on funds and, help bring things to the community. But defunding itself, I don't like how that sits. It just don't sit right with me.
Understood. Thank you. All right,
I
Mr.
would have
Wright.
to agree with Rashad because I think, as you stated before, there are good police officers. And I would like to believe, and I do believe it, that there are more good ones than there are bad ones. But I don't think the problem really is just the police. It's the laws that allow the police to do what it is that they need to do. So if there's anything that needs to be defunded, defund Congress, defund your state legislatures. If you can't produce said legislation, then get out of office. To me, that's the cure. The police, that's just a symptom. We need to make sure that we're holding our elected officials accountable. We need to make sure that judges are held accountable. We need to rework those things. Why does a federal judge need to sit on the bench for the rest of their life? Why? Are they God? Why does a Supreme Court justice get to sit on the bench for the rest of their life? Why do we celebrate the fact that we have senators and congressmen that have been in office for 20 and 30 years when literally all you do is push a button? Yes, I agree. No, I don't. So I feel that it really needs to be an upheaval of our legislative system. I think that's really what's corrupt because a president can come and go, but these judges on the judicial side and on the congressional side, the lawmakers, the policymakers, they stick around. And that, to me, is really the problem.
Wow. I'm learning something. Go ahead, Chris.
I also want to say when I personally say defund, I'm not saying cut anybody's salary because they do, because police do not get paid um, as much as oftentimes they probably should. But I do believe that police departments in many cases, their budget are oftentimes half of a city's entire operating budget, and I do think that is wrong.
Can I chime in one more time?
Yes,
Rashad,
please.
I understand your sentiment, but I think ultimately it's a messaging issue. And I personally feel that it's a messaging issue that's perpetuated by media. Now, I'm not going to get on the whole fake news, whatever, but I feel there are certain words that they know evoke certain emotions. Sometimes that is a good thing, and other times it's not the best. It could be a reallocation. It could be, what do you call it, audit, whatever you want to call it. but it's certain language that's used to put people more divided, make them more divided. What's wrong with anything being audited? Or what's wrong with a reallocation of funds? So I think it's more so a messaging issue and not a clear explanation as to the why. Because for all of that, we need to put some more money in teacher pockets.
Totally agree. Totally
For real,
agree.
for real. All right. I want to say this. I absolutely believe that the word defund is the total wrong. It is confusing and it gives the opposition a real nice handle. Uh, you can put an axe on it, a mallet, a sledgehammer head to beat us with. I think that there has to be a total upheaval. I think that's the word that Tim used. And I like to use the word imagining. And I think that collectively, all of you are Congress. We got to deal with the judiciary. We got to deal with
Thank you.
police. I mean, you really got to deal with all of that if you really want to make a difference. So defund, I don't think that's the right word. I use that word today because that's the word that's being tossed around. And I want our audience to hear from us because I think we're all being lumped into the most extreme voices in the movement. And I want to say this too. This may be a little off the beaten path, but I feel like it must be said. I just had a discussion with somebody on my Facebook page the other day, and one thing that he was saying is almost like the movement has been taken over by our extreme left, and you guys just believe everything that the left wing liberal media says all along that line. And I didn't type this on purpose, but I'm gonna say it now. If most people knew what my political views were, it would probably shock them. I most time keep it to myself. But for me, this is not political in the sense of right, left, Democrat, Republican. You understand what I'm saying? It's not political in that sense. This is about righting a wrong.
Mhm.
And whether and you can't just say that only black people see it. Chris can tell you this because he's up here with me. And we belong to a couple of the same grassroots organizations, and he can second this at all of our functions. I think the only exception was the Juneteenth celebration. It's just as many as our white brothers and sisters as it is us. They march
Mhm.
with us, they organize with us. So even they are saying it's something wrong, and it's been something wrong. And we hear it because we hear conversations that you don't. So I'm not talking what I think I know, I'm talking what I know. We are talking what we know. So I disagree with that word defund. I think that it needs to be upheaval. I think Timothy, that was my favorite word today so far when it comes to describing this an upheaval and allocation of the funds. I don't think that our police forces, most of them anyway, need all this militarized equipment. You got police forces with Black Hawks. I mean, local police need a Black Hawk. Who, come on, man. There's something wrong there, right? So, do I snatch money away from them? No, I don't think that's the answer. But I think have to imagine social workers. I do think you have to imagine uh, people who deal with mental health. I think you have to imagine all those things because just calling the police to deal with things that they are not trained to deal with, that's causing some of our problems. And I say again to that brother Elijah McClain, he should not have been like that. He should not have been handled like that. And he's dead because of it. And we can't keep letting this go without change, saying, well, it only happens this amount of time. Okay, it may be because I don't know exactly what the numbers say when it comes to uh, when all the police killings are added up, what particular percentage are black men. I don't know that number. What I am saying is this even if it is a low number, you can't just count that black man. That's a father that you took away from children, a husband that you took away from wives, a brother that's been taken away from his siblings, an uncle that's been taken away from nieces and nephews, a grandfather, and when you kill your wife, that's a family that wasn't started, promises that never got fulfilled. You have snuffed out. We can't look at that and just push it aside and the number. There is unfairness here, and the unfairness is historic and it is systemic, and that's what it is. We right at the hour and 15 minutes. I'm gonna tell one last thing, and then we're gonna do our best to wrap up. Y'all got a few minutes?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it.
Okay. Body cams. Why in 2020, with all of the technology that's available, why are we still having a discussion about body cams? And Rashad, since you smiling so bright, I want to start with you. Go ahead, sir.
Um, like that's like you say, this is 2020, and we still doing 1820 stuff. Um, I'm a big fan of moving things to the future. Like I feel like I should be able to look at an app, go on my phone, and click an app, and I can look at any body cam of any police officer in the country. I should be able to do that. The police are public servants. Their job is for the public. So anything they do should be public knowledge. So when body cams are being turned off, it automatically that lets you know something is not right. Why don't you want to be recorded? Now I had this discussion on Facebook. Someone said people shouldn't have their privacy shouldn't be watched. And I'm sitting there like, well, we already have a TV show that follow cops around. It's called Cops. So you
And
tell
live
me
PD.
that you have body cam going all the time now? It makes no sense. Then you brought it with, well, what if they have to go to the bathroom or something like that? Or I was like, well, maybe they need to call dispatch, ask for a bathroom break, or we can just build facilities specifically for police officers where their body cams are turned off inside the building where they use the bathroom. As soon as they come back out, it turns back on. Like the fact that this is 2020 and police can arbitrarily turn their cameras off when they want, man, that should be illegal. It should be illegal for police not to have body cams, man. Like as many things go, and honestly, a body cam is going to protect the police because let's say I'm riding down the street, I got an ounce of coke on me and a pistol. Police gets behind me, get behind me. I hop out the car, I drop my ounce, and I start shooting back at the police. I get the court. I say, man, judge, the police making up all this. I ain't do none of that. They lying. You know what that body cam gonna show? That I hopped out the car, I dropped my ounce of coke, I shot back at the police, and everything the police is saying is totally accurate. So I just don't understand why the issue, the discussion of why do we have body cams? That's just me.
Yeah, you think of a whole lot of people. Thank you, sir. Who next?
I don't think there's anything else that need to be said after that.
Only thing that I would add is just like the body cam protects you as the cop, why is it that my cell phone can't be used for the same thing? Because there are some jurisdictions where it's supposedly illegal to record and this, that, and the third. I feel that anytime I am pulled over, it should just be federal. Forget it. I should have the right to pull my phone out and I record you in this traffic stop. Like, if we're going to have accountability, let it go both ways. That's the only thing that I would add.
I like that. I might have told a little teenage lie. I'm gonna do one more thing since we went through that one so quick. Racial and
Kill that.
religious profiling. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna give it to the panel. I could go on and on for the next hour about my encounters with the police that I knew I got pulled over being black. I'm gonna just say this, and we, boy, it had to be in 1988, I believe it was. My brother and I were headed down to Sumter, South Carolina to see my dad. He had just got back Operation Just Cause in Panama. Riding through them little towns in North Carolina off 258, 40, running through I think Murfreesboro and Scotland Neck and uh, Pine Tops on 42 to 301 to Kinley, which was the Klan headquarters. I don't know why we thought it was a good idea to go through there. It was night. We normally wouldn't take those paths at night, but this particular night we did. I forgot why. It was before they did the construction on Route 58, which used to call Suicide Strip at the time. It was very dangerous to take that route from Suffolk all the way to Emporia. It was life and death sometimes. It was a small town we were in North Carolina. That big belly redneck sheriff's deputy, he didn't ask for no license, no registration. He looked in that car. Boy, what are you doing in my town? Now, us four sitting here, we know what that means, right?
Hmm.
You don't have to say nothing else. He said everything need to be said, and we understand what he's saying. I shot my shot, sir. My father just came back from Operation Just Cause. He's a member of the United States Air Force. I haven't seen my father in over a year. I'm just trying to get to him. He looked at me. He said, "Uh-huh," and spit that tobacco out. Said, "You boys got 10 minutes to get out of my town." And 10 minutes here. We all know what that means too, right? So I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Tucker. Religious and racial profiling. Where you at?
Well, first, I want to start being born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. I spent majority of, a little bit of my life in Tuskegee, Alabama. So that that scenario sounds very, very familiar to me. Um, but as far as racial and religious profiling is concerned, it all goes back to that implicit bias. And I agree with what the other panel members said here. There needs to be some type of training. We need to have some type of training for our law enforcement officials, for our judges, um, so that they can understand. As Black people, we have a culture, and our culture allows us to move this way. In our culture, we do this. We say things differently. Our dialects are different, as our brother was saying. I think that racial and religious profiling, with that implicit bias being the underlying factor, is the cause for all of these um, shootings, killings, whatever you want to call it, and these negative interactions. I'll put it that way. Uh, that is the cause of these negative interactions with the police, and I think, and I think that that's something that we need to tackle head on.
Amen. I will Timothy, I want you to go. I want you to be the anchor on this one, Mr. Chocolate Thunder.
Well, when I think of it, I guess I take it from a slightly different perspective because we know that people are profiled by race. I mean, it's happened, I'm sure, to all four of us. And we know we say religious, but a lot of times it's just Muslim brothers and sisters that are
Mhm.
profiled. But I guess I just have a different perspective and take on it. My biggest concern isn't necessarily being profiled because I'm Black, even though that is a big problem. The problem that I have is those that want to pretend that we live in a post-racial society where it's not happening. And that's not just our white brothers and sisters. There are a lot of Black brothers and sisters that will come across as though we are in said post-racial society. And all that does is deflect from the truth of other people's experience. Like to hear a rapper like what was his name? Lil Wayne come on and say, I've never, ever in my life been faced with any kind of racism or prejudice. The fact that you've been locked up before, like shut up. And no disrespect, we don't send your man out for me, don't come for me. But the point is this, like, I feel that's more damaging than actually being racially profiled. When you got my people saying that it's not happening or grow up and move beyond it, we're better than that. That's more damaging than what they're actually doing.
All right, Mr. Rashad, what you got?
Um, but I will start with a story because I remember one time I was with your brother Carl, and he was actually taking me to go see a college, and we drove to this town called Whitville, but it's spelled Whiteville. And we stop in Wendy's, and when we get into Wendy's, and when I say the music stopped, the cook dropped this draw, like everyone just stared at us like it was the wrong place to be at the wrong time, man. And Carl and Tim was like, you know what? Like we gonna go somewhere else, man. We didn't expect one time, and that look they gave us, and ever since then, I remembered that feeling. I was like, so I know exactly what it feels like to be racially profiled when people are staring at you because you are simply a different race. And that bias carries on, like just imagine how that it was like 15 people in that Wendy's and all of them was looking at me like I was something to be feared, something to be scared, something to be all that, something that was shocking. And it had me thinking like, what if it's people in America who never get to meet black people, you know? So let's say you spend 30 years in a town, in a community like Whiteville, where you never meet black people. And then you move to a city like Norfolk. And now you join the police. So now your whole
That's
idea
real.
of what are is formed by exactly what the media is telling you, what your parents have told you. You have no experiences with black people because you lived in a town of all white people your whole life.
Hmm.
So with that being said, like when those things happen, that's how we end up with the disconnect because like you don't you have clearly have no idea of the culture, the city, the environment that you're in. And just like anybody, you put them in a new environment, they got to learn how to adapt, and sometimes those adaptations can be fearful and scareful, and they don't happen, and they become detrimental.
Amen to that. Well, brothers, we coming up on an hour and a half. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead. You took that breath like you're gonna say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you would not believe how many people in my boot camp platoon. I was one of the first black people they had ever seen in their life, and
Mm.
it's very shocking. Where we had this thing in Marine Corps boot camp. You have one canteen, and everybody got a drink out of that same canteen. It's very it becomes a very harrowing experience for them to not only this my first time seeing a black person, but now I got a drink behind this black person too.
Mhm.
It really does something mentally to them. It really does mess them with. So
When you
it's really
said that, you
crazy.
remind me of something. I'm gonna tell y'all that's gonna blow your mind, and we're gonna try to wrap up. 1993, I was in Germany, and there was this young Caucasian lady working for me, and she was very disruptive. And I was trying to have a dialogue before we process that paperwork. You know something about that, don't you, Chris? They get to process that paperwork, you're in trouble. And
So
she began to tell me a story like what you just explained. She came from a small town. I didn't want to say the state because I might give it away. Who she had never seen black people except on TV, and she was raised by her grandmother. And her grandmother told her that we actually had tails, like monkeys. She told
Mm.
me what excitement she had on the way to basic training to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. She couldn't wait to get into that open bay shower because she wanted to see these monkey tails on these black girls. And she said that when she got in the shower and she didn't see the tail, she was staring at one girl's back that she was trying to see. Was there a scar from where they cut it off? Because surely grandma couldn't have lied to her. So that was so shocking to me that I really thought that she was playing. But she made it very clear, no, no, I'm absolutely not playing. So we have to understand that sometimes we deal with our white brothers and sisters who may have been raised and that kind of stuff. And let me tell you, I do my best to try to understand, and all that I get an understanding. Even when I can't agree, I try to get an understanding. But as much as we are trying to understand, I'm just hopeful that our white counterparts will understand also. I do not agree or support the violence that we've seen in the riots, but I can tell you that I understand the rage that will push you to it. But I don't want to leave this without saying, let's be responsible when we talk about the violence and the riots because it has been proven, right, that many times the demonstrators were infiltrated by nefarious groups. Stop acting like you don't know, and stop trying to say that Antifa and the movement are the same. It's not the same. And I believe that most of y'all know that. If you're against the movement, just say that you're against the movement. But let's not make up stuff, okay? So we're gonna wrap here. I am so thankful for these three young men who took time out of their very valuable days to come and share with you, our audience, about what police reform looks like to them. And now you can take this and play it for anybody. These are four black men, and three of which who are millennials who have spoken to you out of their own experiences, out of their own minds and their own imaginations of what it ought to look like. And I'm very prayerful that this discussion was helpful. I want to dialogue. I want to push forward truth that will be a truth that will help all of us to grow. So to Chris Tucker and Stafford, Virginia, thank you, sir, and Mr. Chocolate Thunder, who is Mr. Kashif Winston down in Virginia Beach. We say thank you, sir. And to Timothy Wright Jr. down in Virginia Beach also, we say thank you. And for me, Carl Armstrong here in Stafford, Virginia, we signing off. We say God bless you. May heaven smile upon you. And we pray that this discussion was good and helpful to you. Until next time, have a great day. Bye bye.
Peace.
Have a great
See you later.